of House Bill 24B 1001.
House Bill 24B 1001 by Representatives McCluskey and Pugliese, Senators Hansen and Kirkmeyer, concerning property tax.
Senator Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move House Bill 1001 on third reading and final passage.
To the bill.
All right. Thank you, Mr. President. Members, a few thoughts to share with you this morning. I was reserving most of my comments for this morning because I think this is the right way to wrap up what I would call a 6-year process. And I wanted to spend just a moment to talk about the arc of this story because we have been on a long journey together. Now, we know that legislative memories can sometimes be short. There are structural reasons for that, term limits among them, notwithstanding our good senator from Brighton, who's been here with 16 years of legislative memory, and our good colleague from El Paso County who shares the same length of that story. But it goes back even further than that, because the voters of Colorado passed the Gallagher Amendment in 1982. So that, I think, is probably the right place to start this story, because now, almost 40 years later, the voters of Colorado decided to repeal the Gallagher Amendment. And it was in 2018 when two great colleagues, Representative Esgar, Senator Rankin, chaired an interim committee on property taxes. And one of the conclusions they reached was the Gallagher Amendment was not working for the state of Colorado. There were a lot of reasons for that. It was a bipartisan conclusion, and one shared by a broad coalition of right, left, and center, that we needed to repeal the Gallagher Amendment. I was pleased to sponsor the resolution that put that on the ballot, myself and Senator Rankin. And so that reached the ballot in the 2020 cycle, and nearly 58% of voters said, yes, we should remove the Gallagher Amendment from the Colorado Constitution. I believe that was an incredibly important step in our state's history, because one of the many impacts of the Gallagher Amendment was a severe degradation of school funding. It had led over 40 years for a steady erosion of local share for our schools, and was a massive contributing factor, not the only one, but a massive contributing factor to the negative factor. And the negative factor has always been personal for me, because this year I have a senior in high school. We are doing visits to colleges. It's one of the funnest parts about being a dad. But unfortunately, he has been in public school for the entire length of the negative factor. Think about what that has done to a generation of children. And I am glad that this body was able to end it in last year's budget. Finally, end it. But it's not going to help the generation of kids who lived through it. We had to do better, and we finally did. But why could we end the negative factor? We ended the negative factor because we repealed the Gallagher Amendment and created a stable situation for local share to contribute to the education of our children. Now, we always knew when we repealed the Gallagher Amendment that we would then need to put in a framework for sustainable property tax relief for our constituents. We started that work in earnest in the 2020 session. Myself and Senator Rankin and our colleagues passed a series of bipartisan bills over the next 3 sessions offering that relief. Unfortunately, we were not able to find a long-term package, and so had to settle for 1- and 2-year relief packages. I am proud of that work. Those were not failures. Those are responses to the conditions which we faced at that time. Most of you in the room were here for that episode. We did good work. We had a number of stakeholders who were not ready to make a long-term deal. There's no need to recount all of those. But those 1- and 2-year relief packages helped our constituents and helped the state get through a very tumultuous time. We all know what was happening in our world in March of 2020. We all know what that did to our lives, our health system, and unfortunately the many folks who did not survive that pandemic. It also had a significant impact on our property market. Massive amounts of out-of-state money coming to buy properties in Colorado because suddenly remote work was much more available. That led to giant changes in our property market. That meant that our property tax system was under pressure. We all know that. We heard it from our constituents. So the story continues into the 2023 session, continues into the spring of 2024, and the massive amount of work that went into the Property Tax Commission and eventually led to Senate Bill 233. We delivered a long-term, sustainable framework, more than $1 billion of immediate relief, and importantly, took the concept that we have used for senior homestead exemptions and applied it to everybody in the state. 10% off the first $700,000 of value, helping particularly low and middle income households. That was a huge step forward for the state of Colorado in Senate Bill 233. Fast forward to this moment on House Bill 1001. We are here to finish that work. What did that process look like? There have been folks in this building and folks outside this building who have made, I believe, the false claim that this was somehow cooked up with 3 or 4 people in a dark room with cigars, I guess. A backroom deal, as it has been labeled by those who don't understand this process. In late July, I was asked to join a series of discussions to look at a possible compromise deal that would lead to this bill that we're looking at today. Several meetings later, we had developed a framework. That was then shared on August 9th broadly with the Property Tax Commission. That led to a public meeting of the Property Tax Commission to discuss that framework on August the 12th. A public meeting where we took input from dozens of stakeholders. And that framework was then shared more widely with dozens of additional groups and everyone in the legislature. August 12th. We followed that with a meeting on August the 23rd of the Property Tax Commission where we discussed not just a framework deal, but an actual draft piece of legislation. That was followed by public release of the full bill draft, and then eventually introduction of the bill on the first day of the special session, followed by public committee hearings where we took testimony from the public. I think a dispassionate observer would come to the conclusion that this was a public process. I reject the notion that we are somehow operating behind closed doors and do not bring the important decisions to the public part of our process. So let's finish the story. House Bill 1001, in my mind, is a small extension to what we did in Senate Bill 233. And these extensions are based on the fact that we have new data. We have new information. Our 2-year assessment cycle ends on June 30th. We now have the information that indicates that assessed value is going to be slightly higher than we anticipated when we did Senate Bill 233 back during the regular session. That allows us the space to do these extensions. I also want to make the point about the backfill discussion that happened in this bill and in Senate Bill 233. How do we support the places where there is perhaps flat or negative assessed value growth? Well, we have done that, and we continue to do that in this bill, and that process will play out in the spring. But it also highlights the need for us to have more cooperation at the local government level, have ways to look for efficiencies in how we deliver these services. That's a good thing. I think everyone in this room can agree that we have opportunities for more cooperation to help control costs at the local government level, particularly in places where there is not a growing assessed value tax base. What else did we accomplish with this bill? We ended a cycle of destructive ballot initiatives. We have an agreement that that will continue for the next 3 cycles. So at least until 2030, we have stopped what were going to be devastating ballot initiatives being brought forward by special interest groups in this state. I'm proud to be a part of that effort. So as we think about the arc of this story, perhaps going all the way back to 1982, what have we accomplished? We have ended the negative factor. I'm so proud to be a part of that work. So many people in this room have contributed thousands of hours to that end goal. And one of the key pieces of that is a stable, sustainable framework for property tax in the state of Colorado. We have also created a stable framework for better support of higher education and our medical system and local services. That is also a huge win here. When I decided to run for office in 2015, the top 2 things that I wanted to accomplish in my time in the legislature were, 1, to make Colorado a leader in the fight against climate change. Number 2 was to untie this Gordian knot of Tabor and Gallagher and its negative impact on our kids. That's why I quit my job and ran for office. That is why I have put my family through 10 years of the sacrifices of being in public service. Today marks an important moment in that journey. We have untied this knot together. We have done it in a bipartisan way. We have put our education system on a sustainable path. We have put higher ed in the best position it has been in a decade. I am proud of that work. I'm proud to stand here with my co-sponsor and to work with Republicans and Democrats around the state to accomplish this goal. My friends in this chamber, I thank you for being a part of this journey, and I ask for an aye vote on House Bill 1001.